What is up? Daniel here for the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are ready for the last piece. We got to make our last piece and attach our last piece, and then our upper structure, our shooter, will be finished. We'll just have to mount it in the robot. I think our robot doesn't have wheels yet, so we got a few more things to do, but we are almost done with this sub-assembly here. All right, we're gonna get started building in a second, but before we do, we have to take a moment and say thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible. All right, let's check out some of the pieces that we are going to need to use for this video. First thing that we need is the rest of our polycarbonate sheet. So this would be what's left over after we cut off. We did that launcher rail, and we did the whole floor here. So these two pieces came out of it. If you got the size sheet that was recommended, you should have about this much left. If not, we just need a piece that is 18.25 by 17 inches. So as long as you have something that you can get an 18.25 by 17 rectangle out of, you're good. If you have spacers, if you bought these plastic spacers, so we bought these, I think we bought these from McMaster-Carr, but there are other suppliers that are selling them. They are going to be, sized to fit a 1/4-inch bolt, and they're 1.125 inches tall, so they're 1 1/8 inches tall. So if you have those spacers, you're good. You'll also, of course, need a 3-inch long 1/4 20 bolt or 1/4 24 bolt, whatever, 1/4-inch hardware, and some nylock nuts to go along with that. Of course, if you're using metric hardware, make your own conversion here. If you did not get these plastic spacers, you can 3D print some. You could actually stack up a bunch of washers to get the right height. Anything that's going to support that height works. If you're going for the cheapest solution, getting some of this 1/2-inch PVC pipe is going to work, and we can end up cutting sections off of it that are that tall. So we'll do an example of that. But these are not very expensive, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. So get the spacers if you can. All right, we're going to need wrenches. I think 1/4-inch hardware is going to need 7/16 wrenches in order to tighten it. And then I've got an assortment of marking and measuring tools so we can get our plastic cut to the right size. Okay, before we can get to work on the plastic, which is where we'll start, let me get rid of all the extra stuff so we have room on this table, and then we'll get marking and cutting. All right, let's get our plastic marked out. So the first thing is we just need an 18.25 by 17 inch rectangle. You can measure from basically on your piece that's left over, find the corner that you think has the 2 straightest edges associated with it. So I think mine is this corner here. This one looks a little weird because I can see part of the line and then it disappears and I see part of the line. So I'm worried that corner is a little wavy. But the top and bottom both feel good. So I'm going to work off this corner here. And let's just measure over. Again, you can do this with the tape measure. So let's do, it doesn't really matter. I guess I'll do 18.25 on this one, 18 1/4. So right here. And if this piece ends up a little bit too big, it's not going to hurt anything. So that's something to keep in mind. If it is a little too small, it's probably also not going to hurt anything. If it's too small, we won't have room to put our bolts in. So there is my 18.25. And we'll go ahead and line up a straight edge on that, on those 2 points there. And just mark it well past where we need to go. Okay, and then we said the other direction was 17 inches, so let's go ahead and do that as well. So going this way. Remember to try to keep your tape measure as straight as you can. We're looking for 17, and somewhere over here we will also mark 17. And then let's line this up and our other line across. Okay, that's good. Once again, this one's pretty obvious. This is the side we want. This is our scrap. And we can cut this again, just like we talked about the last time we were dealing with polycarb. You can do the clamp and the score it with a razor blade and break it. You can use the circular saw. You can use the jigsaw. Whatever it is that you have. I think, again, this is small enough that I can cut it on our bandsaw. It might be hard to cut perfectly straight because it's such a big piece hanging off the side. But I think that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to take this over to our little vertical bandsaw and make these cuts. All right, we're over here back at our trusty vertical bandsaw. Let's get this lined up. I think the guard is already good from our last time cutting polycarb, so let's go for it. Okay, and I just took the cut all the way across because that'll make it easier for my next cut. If you want to really preserve and have the biggest piece of material possible, you could have stopped once you crossed the line and then tried to do your second cut. But I think in my case too, the second cut I have to do in this direction, so I was going to cut through this piece anyway. All right, let's get our second cut done. All right, looks good. Once again, we're gonna go file these edges, clean up the piece, and then we're ready to drill holes in it. All right, let's double check. We are 18 and a quarter, 18 and a quarter. Other way is just a little bit longer than 17 and 17. So one of my cuts was a little, I guess, yeah, that was my cut, is a little crooked. But like I said, it is gonna be good enough. All right, now we've got to, I guess we'll drill the holes. Nah, let's file the edge first. So this edge was our clean edge. Let's see, this was the one we just cut, so let's hit that with a file a couple times. All right, that should be pretty good. Now, find your best corner. Find your best corner and put it in kind of the lower right, because that is going to match, or I'm going to flip this around, that is going to match the drawing. And we do need to know that when we go with the drawing, we're going to mark all of our holes from one corner. So instead of just, I mean, like we could look at the drawing and it's like, you know, go in, what is it, in ½ an inch and up ½ an inch. And we could do the same thing here, go in ½ an inch and up ½ an inch. We're not going to do that though, because if we do that from the outside edges, the distance from hole to hole will not be accurate. And that's what we care more about, is keeping our hole to hole measurement accurate. So everything is going to get measured from one corner, and the way I have it lined up, that is going to be this corner, but we do have to make sure our dimensions are right. So going across the whole thing, that is the 18.25. So right now I have 18.25 going across, and then going up is the 17. So make sure yours is aligned like that. So horizontally you have that 18.25, and vertically you have the 17.0. Another thing we can do is we can check on our frame that we've been working on this whole time. So let's throw this up here. We can check on this what our spacing was as well. So the idea with this piece before we make it, just so we can kind of be on the same page, it's going to sit on top like this. But if you remember, we've already drilled this hole, this hole, this hole, and this hole. And those holes are all going to be what this plastic attaches to. So we can kind of check the holes. You could measure the holes here. If the pieces that you made ended up all being the right size and everything was working out for you up until this point, you're good. If that's not the case and you're running into some issues, with sizing, then what you might actually want to do is measure, the distance between these two holes, which is not always the easiest to do when it is already a round hole. But what we're looking for is, if I look at the drawing, going across the robot, we're going to be at 0.5 and we're going to be at 17.75. So that means we should be 17.25 going across this way. And up and down, we are going to be at 16 inches even. Another way that we can kind of do this is after we have it marked, you can always, with the plastic, if we peel the plastic up, we could line it up and see if those holes, or hold it right next to it and see if those holes look like they're going to be close to lining up here. So again, if everything is built relatively correctly so far, if the dimensions are all good so far, you don't have to worry too much about this step. Just the fact that we're drilling a little bit oversized holes, we're going to be able to get stuff to line up. And if it doesn't line up, we'll be able to fix that later. But it's good to kind of check and see if it looks like would you believe this is 16 inches, right, from this hole down to the bottom. And for mine, it looks pretty close to 16, so I'm pretty happy with that. And you could do the across the robot as well, so from like there to here. Does it look like it's 17.25? Yeah, it's pretty close. So set this back down. And let's go ahead and start marking our sheet up. So again, we're going to do all our marks from this corner. So the first hole is going to be 1/2 inch in and 1/2 inch up, which is cool. We can do that with the calipers just because, we can. You probably don't have to. You could do this with a different, a different marking method if you preferred. But our hole is going to be somewhere around there, so we could still color this in on top of this plastic coating and do a couple of scribe marks. So that's one hole. That's the easy hole. Let me get the snap punch here. The rest of the holes, unfortunately, are going to be far enough away from that corner that we cannot use the caliper again. So like I said, we could do 0.5 and 0.5 here and then snap punch it, but that only works if you cut your width to the exact right dimension. Since I'm not convinced that I was that good with that cut, I'm going to go ahead and use the tape measure here. And you can actually see if I go from the edge, right, I'm going to go from the edge here and measure in. And we are looking for this one to be right about 17.75 from this edge. So at 17.75, I am going to make a mark. And for me, it looks like the center of the mark I made is where I'm going to want to be. And then it's still 0.5 up from the bottom, so, well, looks like I need to make a longer mark. So we can use the calipers to mark the second bit. So let's go ahead and extend that 3/4 line. So somewhere in that neighborhood looks good. And 1/2 inch up from the bottom, so we can still kind of scratch across. And for me, that line was about centered on the mark. So probably would have been better if I aimed for the edge of my Sharpie line to be where I wanted it, but I'll just go ahead and get my snap punch right in the center of that line. And that looks pretty good. All right, that's 2 of our holes. Now we have to do our top section. So the top up here, I mean, we know it's going to be somewhere around, this area again. So go ahead and mark that in. And because we're measuring from this wall in, we can do the 1/2 inch right off the side here and sort of go ahead and mark that. And then in from the bottom, up from the bottom, we now need to be 16.5 inches. So measuring this way up, we want to be at 16.5, and that's where we want to put our mark. So since I already used the Sharpie, I'm going to mark with my punch. I'll use it as a little scribe here, or I'll actually just go ahead and punch the hole. So we want to be at 16.5. So let me tip this down a little bit. And 16.5 is right here. So making sure I'm on that line, we'll just go ahead and snap punch that one in. Very good. And now the hardest one. This one we can't use the calipers at all to get us started. So instead, we are going to measure over from, I guess we'll measure up. We'll measure up from the bottom. And we need to be at, let's let's see, 16.5 up from the bottom, just like last time. So let's get, I guess we'll get the Sharpie ready for this one. I need a little more table space. Here we go. All right, so we're gonna come 16 and a half. 16 and a half. Okay, so this time the edge of my line, the bottom edge here is where I want to be. And then we're going to come across, and this one was 17.75. 17.75. And we just want to be on the bottom of this line over here. And that is where we are going to make our mark. So right about, that looks good. Okay, we now have 4 holes marked here. You're going to want to, you know what, potentially this is a good chance for us to drill with a smaller size drill bit first. So the 1764, so the slightly oversized 1/4 inch drill bit, is a little bit big. So I think I'm going to grab a slightly smaller drill bit to do our first hole, just so that we can do a good job of staying lined up on those marks we made. So let's grab, first of all, a couple clamps to hold this in place. And then, let's see, what drill bit do we want? Got a little case here. You know what, I'm gonna drill a 1/8 drill bit. Going even smaller sometimes is nicer for accuracy, but if you drill too small of a drill bit, you have to be careful, they break relatively easily. And I think 1/8 of an inch is a good compromise between those sizes. All right, so 1/8 of an inch drill bit in the drill. Gonna line it right up on our snap punch here and go through. That looks good. And that one looks good. The other thing too is if it's too small of a drill bit, you might have to do another size before you move all the way up to the 1/4 inch. But here I can feel that that is big enough that the, 17/64 bit is biting in just fine. So let's switch up to our bigger size bit here. And we're just going to follow those holes through. And it might catch like that, like mine just did, and sort of pulled the drill down for me. If that happens, don't worry about it. Don't be surprised. Just, run the drill a little bit more. It'll finish opening the hole up. But typically that'll mean you want the drill to spin faster and don't push down so hard. It's going to do it anyway. The other problem for me is because this is unsupported, this corner is unsupported, it's going to bend a little bit. That changes kind of the size and shape of the hole. So it's more likely to grab. All right, those 2 holes are good. Let's go ahead and deburr them if we can. And the bottom too. In fact, the bottom is probably worse than the top on these holes. So the bottom is maybe more important. And if you can't get it while it's clamped down like this, that's fine. Just wait, unclamp it, then you can deburr it. That looks pretty good. I'm going to flip the whole thing around. We'll reclamp it up so we can drill our second set of holes. Okay, switch back to the smaller drill bit. And away we go. And back up to our bigger one here. 17/64. And we'll follow this hole through. Looks okay. All right, we got there. Let's deburr these holes too. All right, unclamp it. If you still have the paper on, which I like to mark on the paper, and then the scratches show up a little bit better than on the clear plastic. But if you already peeled it off, that's fine. Go ahead and take this off. And now that the paper is gone, we can kind of see some of the areas that I should have filed more. We can also check those holes to make sure they're deburred nicely. They all feel good except for this one in this corner. All right, that's better. And then, I'm just going to go ahead and hit the edges again. I guess I'm holding the deburring tool, so we'll try that first. But you might need to do a file. So, and we got some stuff building up there. Let's flip it around and try going this direction. Yeah, that worked better. That one's pretty good. That one's pretty good. That one's pretty good. All right, the last problem is, again, the drawing shows radiused corners. Shows them at 1/4 inch radius. We're not going to worry about getting 1/4 inch, but they are sharp. So I'm going to get my file, and I'm going to knock the edges off all of these corners. Just round it out a little bit. Okay, move on. Okay, move on. And the 4th corner. All right, that looks good. So this piece is now ready to go. I'm going to do a quick cleanup, bring in the frame and the hardware, and let's get this attached to the rest of the robot. Okay, so when I said let's attach the thing to the thing, I lied to you. I lied on accident because I forgot. We're going to show you how to make a PVC spacer if you did not buy the exact spacers already the correct length. So get your PVC pipe if you're doing it this way, 1/2 inch PVC tube. We need to make the spacer 1.125, 1 1/8 inches long. So you could just kind of use the ruler and mark it. I think we can still get a mark here with the calipers, and it's going to be a little bit more accurate. And I think we can get the line to go all the way around. So set your calipers to 1.125. Not 1.25, which I almost accidentally did, but 1.125. And if you're very careful here on the end, you can kind of scribe and rotate the tube all the way around. So once again, just to make it easier for us to see what's going on, we're going to color this in all the way around. And depending on what tool you're using to cut this, you'll want to mark this more or less accurately, all the way around, not all the way around. Oh, that is transferring to the table. Okay, well, another black mark for the table. So, first of all, you probably do not want to cut this with a chop saw, especially not one with the wood blade. PVC can and will shatter and send pieces flying if you do it that way. The bandsaw spins slower, so the bandsaw I think is actually okay to make the cut. You can cut this with a hacksaw and then take it over to like a sander or grinder to flatten it out and bring it to length. They also do sell specific PVC pipe cutting tools, so if you have access to one of those, and they're not too expensive, you do it by hand, so that is another thing you can pick up and buy. Although, I would say if you're buying that tool just to make the 4 spacers, you're probably better off buying the 4 spacers. But let's do this, 1.125 inches. So again, I can line this up on here. And if I just kind of rotate, we get a line. It's a little harder to scribe that line deeply, so it might not show up quite as well. But I do now have a scribe line that goes all the way around my piece of PVC here. Okay. So, again, if you're hacksawing it, just clamp it and cut it. I guess we'll take this over to the bandsaw really quickly because I think that is going to work for us. Over at our bandsaw, I got to adjust this up a little bit. Now, one thing to note about cutting round stuff on the bandsaw is it will try to rotate the piece, like the saw blade will catch and it will try to spin on you. I have such a big piece here that I can get a really good grip on it. And PVC is relatively soft, so this is more of a problem if you're cutting harder stuff like metal, aluminum, steel, so on. But just be aware and be careful if you are cutting it that way. All right, the other thing I'm going to prepare for is I will need a block to push the rest of the way through. So I actually have to adjust my guard a little bit higher so my push block can get in there. All right, let's do this. Okay, well that went through smoothly enough. I didn't need the push block, but we're gonna have to go clean this up and we'll measure it and see how well we did. All right, let's see how we did. First thing is I'm gonna deburr. The deburring tool is great on these for the inside edge. The outside's a little bit harder to follow without it slipping off, so we'll hit the outside with the file really quickly. And we don't wanna take too much off because we did try to cut this sort of exactly the right size for what we need. Okay, and I guess we'll measure that. I'm pretty good, 1.122. Let's see, the shortest side, 1.126, 1.13. So this one bump right here is maybe a little bit too tall. So maybe I'll just file it a couple times. But that's close enough, that's gonna work. We can also compare it to the store-bought ones, and they are pretty much, as far as I can tell, the same height. So that is gonna work if you can get it that accurately. I guess when we assemble, we'll go ahead and use one PVC spacer, and I will use 3 of the store-bought spacers. So to assemble, we're gonna need to bring our frame here back up. All right, so let's line it up. If your holes don't line up top to bottom, you probably gotta rotate it. That looks pretty good. All right, so we'll start working. We can work from any hole. I think I'm gonna work from the top. And what we're gonna have to do is, it's not easy to put this bolt through from the back side. And generally speaking, we don't want extra stuff sticking out the top. So I'm gonna start with the bolt in the plastic piece in our cover here. And then I guess we'll start with the PVC spacer. We'll slide that on. Okay, then I can go ahead and put that into one of the holes. And we will, let me slide this over a little bit so I can get to it better. All right, and then we will, on the back, start tightening a nut. So we won't tighten it, we'll just kind of get it finger tight right now. So we want this to be, nice and loose so we can get all of the holes lined up. Then we'll move down. Let's do this one down here. So again, the bolt goes through, slide the plastic spacer on, and then get that through the hole. And then I will get the nut started, just so things can't fall apart on me. There we go. Let's move around. Same thing on this side now. So we'll drop that in all the way through. Finger tighten it. And our last one up here. All right, so at this point, what I actually want to do is just look and make sure this is sitting nice and flat. My plastic can still kind of wobble around a little bit. That means my holes are lined up well enough. So all the holes we drilled, the 17/64 instead of exactly the size that a 1/4 inch bolt needs, gives us a little bit of that room for it to space out. And for us to have a little bit of adjustment. And since everything looks good, I can tighten mine down. If yours, though, has a big bow in it, like it's trying to pull in super tight and you are really struggling to get these bolts in, what you might have to do is go back and re-drill one of your holes. Try to figure out which one is the one that's the most out of line and run your drill back through in order to try to line that up a little bit better. But when you've got them all in, you're gonna need 2 7/16 wrenches, and you can just go ahead and start tightening them down. If you have a 7/16 socket, that is also gonna work, might save a little bit of time. So we'll go ahead and bring it to tight. Remember, we can over tighten this. We can crush through the plastic, we can crush the box. So get it tight and then stop. This piece, whatever, we want it nice and tight, we want it snug, we don't want it going anywhere, but It's also not really doing too much other than keeping the notes from falling out kind of the side here. That's good. Let's get the front ones. And I've got the ratcheting wrench, so that's helping out a little bit instead of going for the full ratchet. And the last one. Okay, just about there. There it is. And tight. All right, looks good. We're gonna make a check now on this. And that is, let's get one of our notes here and see how it goes. So when we go to slide this in, what you're really looking for is if the note is flat on the back panel, it should not be or barely be touching the plastic above it. If you're squeezing down on that note, if you can see like, you know, a flat bit, a depression coming through there, that is too tight. And so you might have to make some changes. If you cut your own PVC spacers to do that depth, then you might have to go back through and recut that spacer a little bit thicker. So in this case, mine is looking good. It moves nice and smoothly. I can get it to move out by just rotating the wheels, which is what we want to see. And there's just not a lot of extra drag on that top wall. At the same token, if that top wall is super far away, you know, you want to be very close but not crushing it. If it's very far away, the issue is that there might be room for the note to fall out without falling out all the way. And so the wheels might not be engaging where we want the wheels to engage to be able to fling it forward. All right, but that looks good. And so we are done with that step. We've got our top cover on and mounted. I think we've got a few more small things to do, but the big thing left with this is to mount it in the rest of the robot. So we'll do that in the next video. But before we go, we're going to give our special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible.